Good evening and welcome to what I hope will be an informative evening, and I hope when you leave here you're not too depressed as to the changes that have come into effect. I know many of you in the room. For those of you that I don't know, Greg Ernie is my name. I get the pleasure of running through these 132 changes that have been introduced to the Residential Tenancies Act. And why do I get the pleasure? Simply, my property management team across our offices have been that under the pump, and you'll understand when I go through what I'm going to cover tonight, for them to fully get their head around it, and probably more importantly to get their head around even speaking tonight would be probably mission impossible. So I said, well, I'll run through things. So welcome. It's great to have so many of our landlords in the room. And our valued clients. So hopefully we can leave you tonight more informed with the changes and how it's going to affect your investment properties. So the new legislation took effect on the 29th of March, and I will say I'm going to try to, this can be fairly a dry topic, I guess, as you go through these changes. I'm not going to go through the full 132. I'm really just going to break it down to the main things that I see are the main impact as far as yourselves for owners. And probably I just want to say as well that some of the things when I talk about evicting tenants and various things, I always keep in the back of my mind the tenants are the lifeblood of our business as well, and without tenants you wouldn't have income for your rental properties. So please don't take it at all that we're anti-tenant. We're not, but obviously you're our clients, and the impacts that affect you and your properties do have ramifications. So I mentioned there's 132 changes. The change's primary focus was simply to protect the tenants. And I think as you'll go through, it's a shame that there wasn't, in my opinion, a bit more of a balanced approach with some of the changes. There's some new terminology, and if I use the old word landlord, I apologise. It's still old habits take a little bit to iron out, but you are now all known as residential rental providers. And tenants will now be called renters. So if I digress during this presentation and I refer to tenants or landlords, I'm sure you'll know what I mean. Couple of little things I'll just skip through, but just it's interesting some of the changes. We're now not allowed to ask tenants that are applying for rental properties, we're not allowed to ask if they've had a dispute with a previous rental provider, what their rental bond history is. We can't ask the tenant, but we are allowed to ask their other agent or landlord when we do our reference checks, and we're not allowed to ask for bank statements with their daily transactions, but we can ask for evidence of their income. The maximum bond amount and rent in advance, the maximum bond a renter has to pay is equivalent to 1 month's rent. If the weekly rent is above $900 per week, then a higher bond may be requested. We probably don't have too many properties out here that are above $900 per week. Not yet, but after the changes, rents might start to go up substantially, so who knows. Okay, I'll get straight into it. Rental minimum standards. Now, in your show bag that you've got, there's a booklet that we've put together here. I'll get you to, if you want, you can open that up just so you can see what's come in. But the rental minimum standards are substantial. And look, probably to be candid, I think for the majority of our properties and yourselves, I think overall our properties generally would meet minimum standards most likely anyway. Generally, if they don't meet minimum standards as an organisation, we don't want to manage the property anyway. So I think overall we're probably going to be okay. But that being said, there are a few changes and things that you do need to be aware of. So I'm not going to go through all the minimum standards. You can have a read through, and just to show you on the book there. So you've got your minimum standards listed, and then there's even a checklist that the REIV have put together, and as you can see, it's quite substantial with the questions. So new minimum standards now apply. Just so you're aware, non-compliance means that a renter can terminate a rental agreement before they move in or can request compensation. Individuals can be fined just under $10,000. So it's pretty serious what we now need to make sure that our properties standards are at. And as I say, overall, I think our majority of our rental properties are pretty good, but there are some points to note. External doors have to be secure with a deadlock. There's a couple of exemptions. I won't go through too much, but if it's a screen door, that doesn't need a deadlock. The other thing is that when your tenants move into a property, and these are just the little sleepers that can happen. So in the past, we've supplied the tenants with one set of keys. They may have had, say, two garage door remotes. Now, as an example, if we let a property and there's 3 people who are listed on the lease, we've now got to supply each tenant a full set of keys, including garage remote. So, you know, that's like a little sleeper that I call it, that we let the property, there's 3 people on the lease and you've only got 2 garage remotes. Now you've got to go and, not only do we have to get a set of keys cut for each tenant, a full set for all locks, but also you'd need to have a garage remote for each as well. Things like rubbish bins, I won't go through these, they're in there. A lot of these, as I say, are fairly standard, but rubbish bins, toilets, bathrooms, kitchen, laundry, structural soundness, mould, damp, electrical safety, we'll talk about that. So they're listed in that minimum standards, and I'm not going to break that down in its entirety. But we do need to make sure that the property is safe electrical wise, and don't confuse this with the check that you're going to need to do every couple of years. So it applies from the 29th of March, and I was talking to someone in the audience in the middle of the room before we got started about the changes and have we got our head around it. Even today, some of the advice we're getting now is that while my understanding is that the minimum standards take effect for existing tenants, so if you've already got a tenant that's in the property, it takes effect from the 29th of March. We're now starting to see that perhaps if the tenant is on a fixed term lease and that fixed term lease then expires and goes onto a month by month lease, there's a bit of a discussion around that. At that point, we've then got to meet the minimum standards. And there's a few other things. So I've asked Tracy, if I miss something tonight, Tracy has got a remote, Tracy Russell's from our Mooroolbark office. She can butt in and interrupt me if I get something wrong. But some of these things, there will be, we're learning as we go because of the advice or the information that's being given is still coming to us. So, but at this stage, we're running on the basis that if it's an existing tenant, we need to make sure that your property is up to minimum standard by the 29th of March 2023. And for new tenancies, so if your tenant moves out and we've got to go and find a new tenant, then you would need to make sure that now your property meets the new minimum standards. So yeah, so that's electrical safety. So that's all power outlets, lighting circuits that are to be connected to switchboard, circuit breaker, and so forth. We just had a property in the last week that the owners had lived in it for 10 years. We had the inspection done prior to the new tenant moving in, and these owners, bearing in mind it was their family home, they've now got to spend about $1,500. They don't have to do it straight away, but they've got to spend $1,500 to bring it up to the minimum standards. So there are costs associated. Windows, window coverings, lighting, ventilation, heating. So just on the window coverings, it applies from the 29th of March 2022. Each window in every room that is likely to be used as a bedroom or living is to be fitted with a curtain or blind. Now that would be, I would say for the most part, that would be the case anyway, but it's just something to be aware of. Must reasonably block light, provide privacy, and windows, and I think this could be one where some properties might need work, that all windows that are capable of opening must be able to be set in a closed or open position and must have a functioning latch to secure against outside entry. A window lock or bolt will suffice. So for some of those older homes where maybe they've just got the window winder but it's not actually lockable, that would be something that will need attention. Heating. There's two definitions of heating. There's a class 1, which is known as houses, and a class 2 of apartments. I'm not going to really go too much into the apartment side of things. We do manage a few of those, probably they're more newer, so I think overall they'll be probably okay. But for new tenancies, any property that's leased after the 29th of March of this year must have a fixed heater in the main living area. So if we relet a property, so as an example, an older home, you might recall some of the older homes originally had like a wall furnace perhaps in the hallway. Now, when we're reletting that property, there needs to be a heater, either a fixed heater on the wall or ducted heating or a wood fire or something like that in the main living area. Any property that's on a current tenancy that was let prior to the 29th of March has until the 28th of March 2023 to install a fixed heater. So if you don't have a fixed heater, you don't have ducted or any of those sort of heating in that main living, then you've got till the 28th of March, 2 years basically, to get that done. After the 28th of March, all fixed heaters must have an energy efficient heater. So my advice is, if you do need to install a heater of some sort, rather than just putting a heater in and then in 2 years' time you've then got to go and put another energy efficient one in, make sure it's an energy, and the property managers will advise you on that, but if you are coordinating that yourself, make sure it's an energy efficient heater. Wood fires are okay, ducted heating, hydronic heating are okay, provided the outlet, as I say, is in the main living room. So with sales at the moment, we now have to, when we sell a property, we've got to have a property disclosure form. Now, as landlords, you now need to supply a property disclosure form as well. Now, that is in your booklet as well. If you fast forward a couple of pages, so you'll see it's called the required disclosure by a residential rental provider. It's not numbered, but it's anyway. That's what it looks like there. So this will be one as an organisation, and for yourselves as landlords, we're still working our way around how this is going to make sure we keep up with this, because this needs to be supplied to the tenant every time we let a property. Now, as agents, an agency, we're not going to know every detail regarding the disclosure, and also as part of the disclosure, I believe the landlord will need to sign. So unfortunately, it might be when we lease your properties, you're now going to have a bit of paperwork to do. Hopefully there'll be some way, I guess, as the agents that we can do it, but at this stage it's looking like as owners you're going to need to complete that every time we lease your property. And you'll understand if you don't like the paperwork that's involved, when you go through and you see the amount of paperwork that our property managers now have to deal with as a result of these changes, it makes you shake your head in disbelief. It is absolutely incredible. So mandatory disclosure requirements: embedded electrical network, location of a homicide in the last 5 years, has there been one, whether the premises comply with the minimum rental standards, the date of the gas, electricity, pool and safety checks, and I'll talk about that in more detail, and the recommendations from those gas or electrical checks as to any works that need to be done, whether the premises is a registered place, and a registered place is something that's, say, got heritage listed as an example. I don't think we'd have too many of those that we would manage, if any, but nonetheless something to be aware of. Whether it's had any history of drugs, whether there's any asbestos at the property, any building or planning applications notice, order or around, the decladding, getting rid of the fire cladding. We probably don't have too much of that, but like in your high-rise type setups. Current domestic, is there a current domestic building dispute? And current dispute under the Owners Corporation Act. And another one that's going to be a lot of work, certainly for our property managers, and we'll definitely need your cooperation, is we're now going to need to supply a copy of the owner corporation rules. I would say the majority generally are standard, but sometimes the body corporates or the owners corp do have their own sets of rules as well. So that's something now that we're now going to have to supply to the tenant when they move in. So modifications is probably one of the ones that I think has been certainly publicised out there, that I think as owners we've all been fairly nervous about what a tenant can just go and do now to the home. So just to run through, so these are some of the things that the tenants are now able to do without requiring consent. So this is for any type of rental property. Installation of non-permanent window film for insulation. Some of these aren't bad. Installation of a wireless doorbell, replacement of curtains, provided they keep the originals. A lot of tenants do that now anyway. Installation of adhesive child safety locks on drawers and doors. installation of pressure-mounted child safety gates, installation of a lock on a letterbox, installation on surfaces other than exposed brick or concrete walls of picture hook screws for wall mounts, shelves or brackets, wall anchoring devices, hardware mounted child safety gates on walls, installation of LED light globes, LED light globes, installation of water efficient shower head, provided they keep the original, installation of blinds and cords or anchors, installation of security lights, alarm sisters, security cameras. So that, what I went through there was no consent was required. The tenants are just able just to go and do that. And look, probably a lot of those things, I think they've probably gone and done some of those things over the years anyway. This is modifications that basically cannot be reasonably refused. And the advice that I'm getting is that basically you can't refuse anything, or you've got to have a bloody good reason to refuse. An example, I'll come to it in a moment, but installation on exposed brick or concrete walls, pitch hook screws, wall mounts. So if you've got a home that's got an internal brick wall as an example, they've now got to ask for consent, but you've got to have a pretty good reason as to why you don't want that to happen. Wall anchoring devices, same again. Hardware mounted child safety gates, so that's on your exposed brick or concrete walls. Installation of fly screens on doors and windows. If they want, they can go and put or basically ask for consent to put a vegetable or herb garden in. Secure a letterbox. Painting of the rented premises. So that's probably been one of the ones that I think's been the most talked about, that the tenants can now basically go and paint the home whatever colour they want. They have to ask for permission, but in a nutshell, I'm not sure what the call it tribunal would see as a valid reason as to why we can say no. Yeah, that's probably a big one. That's probably one of my concerns, that they're going to go and paint the walls whatever colours. Modification to secure external gates. Refusing consent. So unless it's major works, i.e. knocking down a wall, a rental provider basically can't refuse consent. So it'll be interesting when we do refuse consent. I guess probably in line with that, my thought around that is a tenant can ask, we can refuse. Then if the tenant then wants to take it further, well, that's the tenant's choice. And they can go down that path, and as I say, we haven't explored the process around how that goes, whether they take us to the tribunal if they want to paint as an example, or do some works. I think probably where the issue will be, and this is one of the challenges we're faced now, is there's been that much publicity that I think already the tenants think that they've almost got free rein. So yes, they might have to ask for consent, but once the house is painted, it's painted. And that's where the bun fight might then entail at the end of the tenancy. Conditions on consent. The rental provider may, so if depending on what work a tenant wanted to do, the rental provider may require work to be carried out by a suitably qualified tradesperson. The rental provider, however, is not able to choose the tradesman to do the work. So that probably blows my mind a little bit. The tenant wants to, I don't know, let's say install security cameras through the home or something, but we can ask that it be done by a professional, but at the end of the day we can't say who the work's to be done by. The tenant can pick who they want to do that work. Obviously we can ask for certificates to show that it's been signed off and done properly, but at the end of the day. So rectification, the tenant moves out, and so this applies to everything that I've just gone through with modifications. So your picture hooks and all of those sort of things, doesn't matter what they do, we can ask for it to be rectified, taking into account normal fair wear and tear. And a rector must rectify at the end of the tenancy, but that being said, at the end of the day, and I know from the experience when you go to the tribunal, the referees would basically throw any of my team out if they took a tenant to the tribunal because the tenant has left 3 picture hooks in the wall and they've painted a wall from, call it beige to pink. I would not like the chances as to how our rental team would go. I can say to you, as you can see as we go through these changes, not only are the changes in favour of the tenant, but generally whenever we go to the tribunal, the referees are always more lenient on the tenant than they are the owner, unfortunately. Bonds, so depending on what work though a tenant does want to do, if it is, mate, so let's say the tenant wanted to paint the whole home as an example, or they wanted to do some, I can't even picture what sort of work they would want to do, but if they want to do something substantial, in some circumstances an additional bond can be sought. We would have to get a quote from a qualified tradesperson as to what that cost would be to rectify the modification. So there's a fair bit to take in there. Safety-related activities. This is probably where it's going to hurt the hip pocket for you pretty much straight away. So, electrical safety check. Safety checks of all electrical installations, fittings and appliances provided by the residential rental provider. You now have to have your home checked electrically every 2 years. So every 2 years you've got to have it go in, and I've supplied for you, if you flick over to the next page, following on from the disclosure documents. And this is an example of the electrical check. How are we feeling? Are we feeling all right? Yeah, good. So the residential rental provider is to provide the renter with the date of the last safety check, if requested. So once we've had it inspected, if the tenant is in there and they want to know, well, when was the last electrical done, we have to have on file the report to be able to supply to them, stating when it was last inspected. If on the day of occupancy an electrical safety check has not been conducted within the previous 2 years, the residential rental provider must arrange for a check to be carried out as soon as practical. And that's not months, that would be that it would need to be sort of happening within a couple of days to a week or so. So basically now if your tenant vacates and we've got to go and find you a new tenant, we now need to get that inspection done. And I can say to you, so far with the properties we've had inspected, every property has come back that it's needed to have work done to it. The gas safety check, so same for the gas. Only applies obviously if you've got any gas fixtures or appliances at the property. And it's the safety checks of all the gas installations and fittings. And once again, the checks must be done every 2 years by a licensed or registered gas fitter. Once again, the rental provider, same as the electrical, must provide the renter with the date the last gas safety check if requested. And if on the day, the same again as the electrical. If it's not done within 2 years of a new tenant moving in, then it needs to be done within a reasonable time as soon as practicable. Smoke alarms. Now this one's nothing new. We've been doing this, but there's a point that I want to make on this, that if you're one of our owners where you're choosing to check the smoke alarms yourselves, and I would hope that you're not, because I think you're absolutely leaving yourselves wide open for liability. And I think with what I'm going through, with what I've just mentioned about the electrical and gas and the smoke alarms, our biggest concern as an agency and our biggest concern for you guys as landlords is, to me, this is the biggest liability sleeper option here. That if something happens and you haven't had it inspected, we haven't had it inspected, you haven't had it inspected, we're all in the gun. And the solicitors will have an absolute field day. Smoke alarms. Ensure smoke alarms are correctly installed and in working condition. Ensure each smoke alarm is tested according to the manufacturer's instructions at least every 12 months. So the other two are every 2 years. Smoke alarms have got to be done every 12 months. And it's not just a case of pushing the button. They do a smoke test, and I don't know how they do a smoke test, but they do a smoke test and a decibel test. So there's a bit, and it's not just a case of just pushing the button or changing the battery. Ensure that the batteries in each smoke alarm are replaced as required. Immediately arrange for a smoke alarm to be repaired or replaced as urgent repair if they are notified by the renter that it's not working. On or before the commencement of the rental agreement, provide the renter with the following information. So this is something new. Information about how each smoke alarm in the premises works. Information about how to test each smoke alarm in the premises. Information about the renter's obligations not to tamper with any smoke alarms installed and to report if the smoke alarm is not working. Renters must give written notice to the residential rental provider when they become aware a smoke alarm is not in working order. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the management side. So one question you might have is, I'm an electrician or I'm a gas plumber. Can I do these inspections myself? Yes, you can. You must be a qualified tradesperson, and they must provide us, the managing agent, with a copy of the report and compliance certificate, which must show the date on which it was done, which tradesperson did the inspection, and the report detailing its compliance, or what works needed to be done, and proof those works have been completed. The compliance report, gas and electrical reports, they're in your booklets. So there's a gas one there, so I've shown you the electrical, and there's also then a gas one in there, so you can see what's involved with that as well. And as you can see, that's substantial also. So as I said, high risk to me, this is, if there's a number of things, but this is a high risk thing now that you all need to be well aware of. That if you miss these checks or they're not done and something happens, you're well and truly in strife. We've got 2 years to do the properties that are currently tenanted, so we don't have to do them straight away. But obviously, with the amount of properties that are out there, that we can't do them all at the last minute. And the other thing that we've been chatting about is, I guess, to spread the cost load, we're looking at probably doing, say, an electrical 1 year and then a gas the following year, and at least that's going to spread the cost over the 2 years, rather than having sort of this money coming out every 2 years and affecting your property income. So some of you would have received originally some information from us. We had sought, there's a company that we use now called Smart House that service the smoke alarms. They came to us and offered a package as far as the electrical and the gas. And in a nutshell, that's what their quote was, plus the smoke alarms, which is the annual. So roughly, when you work that out, if you work the cost out and split it over 2 years, it roughly, for them to manage it for you and for us, would be about $440 per annum. However, we've got very good relationships with our electrician companies that we use, and also our gas company, and they've been gearing up. They've known for some time that these changes have been coming in. So they've come back. So for Murrelbach and Lilydale office, we use a company called Verve Electrical, and for $250, including GST, they will do the electrical check. And for the Croydon landlords that are here, I think I might have the spelling slightly incorrect, but Crowell's Electrical, they will also do the same, $250, including GST. As part of that quote, if they have to fix or replace 3 light fittings or power points, so to speak, they will fix those at no charge. And for the amount of work and testing that's involved, I just think by the time the tradesman drives to the property, does all of the checks, the testing, and if they've got a fixed thing, I reckon that's a remarkable price. Double D Plumbing is who we will be using to do all of the gas checks. So cost depends simply based on the number of gas appliances. If you've only got 1 gas appliance, it's $190, including GST. If you've got 2, it's $220. And if you've got 3 appliances, it's $250, including GST. The smoke alarms, that we're still using Smart House, and that'll be $99 per year. And as I say, it's now no longer sufficient for you as owners to manage that yourself. You need to have someone to do that. So we estimate, depending on really how many gas appliances you've got, we've been able to get it down through those trades that it'll be somewhere between $290 and $350 per annum, depending on how many gas appliances, obviously, that are in the property. So, look, I think for the amount of work that's involved, to me, it's a really good price. At the end of the day, you're free to use your own people. You're free to do it yourselves. But I can just say to you, from our point of view as a business, and from your point of view as landlords, you want to make sure you don't miss that 2 years. And I think for the cost and our systems, the way we're going to have it set up, that these things will just happen. To me, it's peace of mind. That's just the cost to do the checks. Additional costs may be incurred depending on what is found by the checks. And as I say, so far every property we've had checked has needed works to be done. In your booklets there, can I just grab that, Roach? Can you just pass that up to me, please? So in your booklets there, we've supplied for you. So for Murrelbach and Lilydale landlords, you've got the Verve electrical. Everyone's got the gas compliance. And then you've got the smart house. And for Croydon landlords, I only got this in today, like literally a couple of hours ago from Crowes. We do have them. They're not in your show bag, but for Croydon landlords, you can see Brent, Jess, Reese, and Don. They will have those, and you can grab those. Guys, if you're comfortable with that tonight, I ask that you complete those and give them to us, and that will then take care of that, and then we'll at least that's one bit of paperwork that you've got and it's out of the way. Naturally, you can take them with you and read them and drop them back. That's fine as well. Swimming pools. Look, we don't manage too many properties with swimming pools. That's a big liability as well. But swimming pools, a rental provider must ensure the pool barrier is maintained in good repair. Renters must give written notice to the residential rental provider as soon as practical if the barrier is not in working order. And if notified, the rental provider must immediately arrange for the swimming pool barrier to be fixed, ASA repaired, replaced as an urgent repair. Yeah, the renter. So I guess in the past, tenants would put those blow-up swimming pools and all of those sort of things. The renter must not erect a relocatable swimming pool without prior written advice to the residential rental provider. Urgent repairs. Urgent repairs need to be reported to the rental provider. That hasn't changed. As a rental provider, obviously we need to act on those immediately, which we do, and we have our systems in place for. One thing that has changed is that if the rental provider does not promptly respond, a renter can engage a qualified tradesperson to rectify the urgent maintenance. The rental provider would need to reimburse the renter, so in other words, the landlords yourselves would need to reimburse the tenant the cost of the work, which could be up to the amount of $2,500. So previously, if as rental providers you didn't get an urgent repair done and attended to, the tenant could go out and fix that hot water. They could go and buy a new heater, whatever it might be, and they've now got a budget of up to $2,500. Rental non-compliance register. This is a new one. Landlords and agents who are found by VCAT to have breached a duty will have their name, rental property and nature of offence listed on the register. The register will be made available to the public on the Consumer Affairs website. And I was going through this today and I buzzed down to Trace. I said, Trace, what tenant register is there for the tenants that don't do the right thing? So I can give you the answer on that. We have, what's it called? It's the...
It's the National...
National Tenancy Database.
Yeah, National Tenancy Database. Unfortunately, with the National Tenancy Database, they only keep the records for 3 years. So if you've got a bad tenant and it was 4 or 5 years ago, it's actually not going to come up on the National Tenancy Database. So it's, again, a bit one-sided.
Oh, I don't know the answer to that. That was my question too.
There's nothing stopping us from making our own do not touch list.
Yes. Yep. Look, one thing I will say, we have a fairly good relationship amongst other property managers around the area. So I know sometimes word will get out of a bad tenant or something, and it'll get distributed. So there's ways that we do that, and we do look after each other in that aspect as well. Compliance and administration fee. So you can probably see there's a fair bit of work that we're now having to take on that is something we've never had to manage before. We are going to be introducing an annual compliance fee for us to just really to keep up with this work. We are looking at, the cost is going to be $99 including GST. And as part of, and I'll come to it a little bit further, but we are looking at having, certainly at Murrelbach, we're looking to have an additional person that is just going to manage compliance. Lilydale and Croydon are working on how they're going to manage that, but the amount of work that's involved with all of this paperwork is through the roof. Utility charges. So charges relating to pumping out and cleaning of sewerage and septic tanks, that's now your liability. A new one, and for any builders in the room or developers, previously you've been able to build a unit, and it's been, if the tenant has wanted to run the phone through and connect it, it's been the tenant's cost. It's now changed that the landlords have to supply that. It's just something to be aware of, and so just something that now you can't have the tenant covering the cost of that. Pets. Tenants must now seek their landlord's written consent to keep a pet at the rental property using the new pet request form. Another form. Landlords must not unreasonably refuse consent for a tenant to keep a pet. If a landlord wants to refuse consent, they will have 14 days after receiving the form to apply for a VCAT hearing. And the VCAT may order that the landlord's refusal is reasonable and or that the pet is excluded from the property, or the tenant can keep the pet on the rental property or at the rental property. Before making a decision, VCAT may consider the type of pet the tenant wants to keep, the character and nature of the property itself, including appliances, fixtures and fittings, whether refusing permission to keep the pet on the property is allowed under any law, for example, a local council law, anything else it considers relevant. If the landlord, so when we get a pet request form come in now, if we don't respond to that within 14 days, then it's taken that you've given consent and the tenant is then allowed to keep the pet at the property. Righto, I'm going to, rent arrears has been a little change. I'll try not to get too bogged down on this, but because at the end of the day, it's what you're paying us to do. But in a nutshell, the big change probably is in the past that we've been able to apply to VCAT and obviously wait for the hearing whenever that may be. And if the tenant paid the rent between when we applied and when the hearing was, we could still go to the tribunal and we could still either get an adjournment order or we could ask for a possession order and so forth. Now what they have brought in is the tenant is allowed 5 strikes. It's 4 strikes and then the 5th, hopefully they're out. But so in other words, if a renter is 14 days overdue in rent, then obviously we then serve the notice to vacate, which is standard what we do. If the renter repays the overdue rent within the 14-day notice period, then the notice that we've just served on the tenant has no effect. That's one strike. So that applies to the first 4 times, and that's in a 12-month period. So if you've got a tenant that's a constant late payer, in a nutshell, and the key point with this is every 12 months, they call it the 4 strikes or the 5 strikes, resets every 12 months. For the 5th time in the same 12-month period, the notice to vacate remains valid and enforceable even if the tenant pays. So if we've got one of these serial late paying tenants that is constantly late and we keep serving them notice and then they wait and then they pay, then we've got to cancel that hearing. Then they're late again the next month. We do the same, we serve it. So we do that 4 times, then on the 5th time, even if they then pay, we can then, at that point, then go to the tribunal. So very frustrating because in the past, I guess we've been able to use VCAT a little bit to our advantage, that even if the tenant has paid, we've still been able to go and seek a possession order. Not that VCAT would probably grant it much, but if we did get a possession order, at least we could have that, I guess, something to hold over the tenant. So yeah, so there you go. Important to note, the 5-strike rule resets every 12 months. This is just the sort of garbage that I guess is out there at the moment. I saw this, it was actually put on an REIV site that we follow, but Tenants Victoria, you know, you talk about, this is the advice they're giving the tenants. Remember that you can only be made to leave your rented home if VCAT makes an order. So, you know, that applies to a tenant that's overdue with rent. If we've served a tenant notice to vacate because we've sold the property and we need vacant possession, this is the sort of just garbage advice that these guys are putting out there. I won't go through through that. Rental increases. Rents can't be increased any more than once every 12 months. So one of the things, and this is something we're probably going to work out how we're going to progress on this forward, but when we the method calculating the rent increase, now we have to include that in a rental agreement. So we've actually got to put into the lease now as to how we're going to calculate what the rent increases will be going forward. At this stage, we're thinking of probably something fairly, not giving too much information, but just basically saying it'll be based on comparable market rents, and we think that leaves us pretty good. But yeah, and the rent increase cannot be any more than the method calculates. I'm hearing various things. I saw a thing today on the REIV site. A fellow property manager asked, "Is there a limit? How much? Can you only increase it up to 10%, or what are you allowed?" Nothing's been stipulated in the Act. I guess all at this stage that I can say is that you have to keep it in line, basically, with market rents. So 60 days notice to be given. It's got to be in a set form, which shows the amount the rent is being increased to and how that increase was calculated. And we've now also got to provide to the tenant, advise the tenant that they have rights and that they can apply to Consumer Affairs Victoria to investigate the rent increase if they like. Terminating a renter. So one of the things that unfortunately has gone is the 120-day notice to vacate for no reason. That's now been scrapped. So if you've got a tenant that probably is not a desirable tenant and you're sort of thinking, how can I get rid of this tenant? Unfortunately, you can't just give them 120 days notice to vacate. So landlords now, we must have a reason, and the reason's basically that you want to sell the property, that you want to move in, that they're keeping a pet without approval, that they're in arrears of rent, that they've been threatening or intimidating either yourselves as landlords or our team, or it's at the end of the fixed term tenancy. So there was a question asked about the length of the lease. So terminating a renter, key point, if you're not happy with your tenant and provided they are still in the first lease period, then serving the tenant notice to vacate for end of the fixed term tenancy is the best option. So it could be, and I guess we still haven't got our heads around whether you're better to have a longer lease or 12 months. I don't know what the answer on that is, but that's something, I guess, to keep in mind, that I guess if you did have a longer lease, but at the same time, I don't know whether a tenant's going to be prepared to sign up for a 2-year lease straight away anyway. But I think if I can say to you, and certainly our team will be aware of it, and we'll be advising you that if we think there's a tenant that probably needs to be moved along and they're in that first 12-month period, we'll be letting you know what course of action we think should be taken. Now you might be thinking, after all of this, bugger this, I'm out. We've had a number of owners that have, Trace, I think it was 24 or 26 of our landlords have engaged us to put their rental property on, about 30 in the last, probably, what's that, in the last 6 weeks?
4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks. So there is a bit of a process on that, and as far as that too, it could be because of the changes. It could also be that we've just probably gone through or are in the process of one of the biggest booms that we've seen the last couple of months. So I don't know whether it's all to do with these changes, but there has been some changes that affect us now when we sell a property. We've got to give the agent must give 7 days notice prior to us conducting a sales appraisal. We've got to give 14 days notice of intention to sell. I've attached the notice to sell document. That's the last page there in the booklet. So we've got to supply that to the tenant, and we've got our own letter we've been working on that we have, and we actually get the tenants to sign off on a few things as well. A change that they've brought in now, compensation to renters for inspections. So we've now, when we do an inspection, we've got to either 1/2 of the daily amount of the rent payable under the residential tenancy agreement, or $30, whichever is the greater per tenant per buyer inspection or open inspection, whichever is the highest amount. This will be noted by our property management team, and the rent will be reduced by the appropriate amount. That's how we're going to manage that. Unless otherwise agreed between the selling agent and the tenant, that we're only allowed 2 inspections per week, and week permitted, and a minimum of 48 hours notice must be given prior to those inspections unless agreed prior. So we're, in a nutshell, we've had a number of discussions with our sales team as to how best to now handle this. Look, I think the majority of tenants we've always found, I mean, there's been regulations how we've had to do inspections prior, and provided we go and sit down with the tenants and meet with them and work out a plan and probably just have a genuine conversation with them. Generally, we've been able to work out an arrangement. But if we do have one that is a stickler to the rules, then it's 48 hours notice in writing that we've got to give them, and we're only allowed 2 inspections. Keeping in mind that every time we do an inspection, as in an open for inspection, which we're allowed, the 2 inspections are at an hour each, then it's a $30 each time. So we're basically looking at having a scheduled open and then probably a time slot on a Monday or a Tuesday night, scheduled with the tenant for another hour or so, either for another open or where the buyers can come back for another look, and that's how we anticipate to do that. Some of you may be thinking that you're going to, that right, I do want to sell at some point. I won't spend too much time on this, but I think the choice is now and it probably depends on the quality of your tenant, but if you do decide you're going to sell your property, first of all, it's not just the quality of the tenant as to how they present your home, but also I guess it's, do we anticipate that the tenant is going to give us grief once the property is sold, and will they vacate at the date that they're meant to be out by once we've served them notice? Because if they don't, and they don't move out, and we've applied to VCAT, and with the delays of VCAT and all of that sort of thing, I can see some sales actually going pear-shaped because we've got a tenant that's a pain in the you-know-what and doesn't vacate in time, and then the buyer is able to get out of the sale. So there's a bit to consider, and that's something that our sales team and the property management team, we will advise you if you do look to sell your property. I guess probably a little bit of how we feel we're going to get on with the tenant and how they're going to present it. But just the other option is that you serve your tenant notice and then you look to sell the property vacant. But I think if you're going to do that, yes, it's an option. But I just did some rough sums as to what I would estimate it may cost if you go down that path. I reckon all up, if you go to give your tenant notice, they move out, then you do a little bit of work to present it. You might get it staged, you might paint it, put a bit of new carpet in or whatever, bit of garden or maintenance. Then it might be vacant for 4 months, keeping in mind it's vacant from the time the tenant moves out to the day that it settles. So you've lost a bit of rent there. It might be around 15, 16 grand roughly that it could cost you. Now, the thing you're going to have to weigh up obviously is, does that mean by you doing that work that you're going to get an extra 30 or 40,000 because the home will present better? Who knows? And they're things we'll discuss with you, but that's just something just to give a bit of thought. I'm going to wrap up, but just our team, I take my hat off to these guys. They've been working so hard to adapt to these new changes. So many new systems and procedures. We're still working through it. I've only gone through not even half of the actual new changes are that thick. It's massive, the work that we're having to do as a business to bring it in, and the property managers are well and truly at copying that. As I said, the amount of work that they now have to do has just increased at a level I've never seen before. And on top of that, last year we had the rental moratorium. We weren't able to evict tenants. We couldn't increase rents. Landlords, as yourselves, you couldn't sell your property if you wanted to because we couldn't serve the tenant notice to move out. It couldn't have been a worse time to introduce such changes. Mind you, I don't think there would have been a good time to introduce it, but I caught up with Leah from the president of the REIV. She said about a third of property managers have left the industry in the last 6 months. So, it's been a pretty full-on period. We're doing all that we can to look after our team. We've had a number of our property managers leave, pregnancy and various things. We've got a number of our new team. I'm going to get them to, I promised I wouldn't get them up on stage, but I will just get them to come around to the side so I can introduce them. To understand what's involved to manage a property and to get your head around these new changes, they have been unbelievable. As I say, we're still finalising our systems. As you can tell, some of your questions, we haven't got all the answers. We'll continue to work through that. You've got those forms there. Fill those in. If you want to have a read through them, that's fine. I'll come to you in a moment. Guys, I reckon we might call it. Yes, no, look, it was just fun work. Thank you.